It's time now to review what's making headlines in the papers this morning. So let's bring in Arise analyst Constantine Koku.
Good morning, Adesua.
Good morning.
Happy Friday to you and to Charles and Yolanda.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I love your outfits today. It's really giving Friday.
You actually look so brilliant.
Thank you. It is Friday. I'm so ready for it. Okay, to look at the papers with us this morning, we have Eniola Akinkuotu. He is the Chief International Correspondent of the Africa Report. Welcome to the program, morning, and we'll begin with this day newspaper. In this day, Seplat Energy completes acquisition of Mobile Nigeria, set to double production. The public was first made aware of this deal in 2022, and Seplat is also listed in the Nigerian Exchange and the London Stock Exchange. The deal, which was first valued at $1.28 billion, was finally considered at $800 million. I mean, Eniola, what a major step by an indigenous company in the oil sector. We also have Oando that acquired Nigeria Ajib Oil Company recently. Local players really stepping into the game.
Yeah, this is good news. I mean, if you look at it very critically, Seplat has been, I think it is actually the most profitable indigenous oil firm in the country. And this deal, so many of us expected it to have gone through. I don't know why it took so long. It took over 2 years. And remember the controversy that greeted it when it was first announced. You know, it was first announced by Buhari's spokesman. And later on, the NUPRC came out to say, no, the presidency has no powers to do such. And then after some time, the whole thing was, suspended. It just took so much time. At least finally, I'm happy that it's gotten to this level. You know that if you look at the president's 2025, the 2025-2027 medium-term expenditure framework, he's projecting that oil production will be about 2 million barrels per day. So when you have deals like this, coming to fruition, it gives you hope that, yes, it's very possible that Nigeria can, meet its OPEC quota and even exceed it. So kudos to Seplat, and I think this should be commended. Of course, as you spoke earlier on too, Oando was able to also, meet its, buy of Ajib's onshore assets too. So Nigerian indigenous oil companies are pulling their weight, and this is good news for everyone. More petrodollars, more jobs.
Okay, let's stay with this day. There's another story on the website that is also important. It talks about the Labour Party going to court, wants to declare seats of defectors vacant in the National Assembly. We know that 6 rep members had defected to the All Progressive Congress. The party has also asked that every salary, emolument, and privileges received from the date of defection be declared, or not be returned, actually. Charles, maybe it's about time someone tested this in court.
Actually, I want to say here that the Labour Party is actually trying to add a bite to its bark. First of all, they threatened. Now they've actually gone to court. But then it'll be interesting to see how it turns out, because no one, particularly in Nigeria's National Assembly, has lost his or her seat as a result of defection. So let's see how it turns out this time around.
Yeah, but it's also been tested in court multiple times, and it's currently in court, but this is in this case of the State House of Assembly members in Rivers State, with Damago asking INEC just, I believe, 2 weeks ago to declare their seats vacant because those seats should belong to the PDP. He believes as they were elected as PDP members, but they defected to the APC. But as Charles said, we haven't seen anyone lose their seats. But the Constitution is clear, but they are citing that there is problems within the Labour Party, and there are exceptions provided even within our laws that if there's a crisis within the party, they can switch sides.
So there's already a loophole to be exploited.
Exactly.
Well, let's see how that goes. The Guardian. More men losing prostate cancer fight to hefty costs and late detection. At least 49 cases recorded daily. Of the cases, 31 die every 24 hours. Drug and daily care costs average 570,000 naira per patient. Radiotherapy care costs average of 850,000 naira in public facility and 3.5 million naira in private hospitals. I mean, this is a grim picture, especially in the current economic conditions. It's not often that we have stories about health in this country. So kudos to the Guardian for this report that they have put together. It requires attention on Eniola.
It's really saddening. I mean, I read that report earlier today, and there's an old man who said he spent about 250,000 naira just for the test alone. I mean, in a country where universal health coverage is just about 5% or less, you can imagine what people are going through because they constantly have to pay out of pocket. Now, when you add the current economic crisis into the mix, then you see that, look, it's a double whammy. Nigeria currently, the multidimensional poverty statistics says, I think about 115 million people live in multidimensional poverty. When you put that all together, you see that we're in a huge mess. Unfortunately, I don't know what the government is doing about it. And, you know, speaking of cancer generally, it's, I think enough investments are not going into it, maybe because it's not a communicable disease. If cancer was communicable, I'm sure there would have been bigger investments into it.
I think that's why, in general, the healthcare system is broken, whether you're talking about this kind of diseases or the ones that are communicable. The point then is that people, especially in today, are unable to cope with the financial burden. When you read that report, it talks about, gives details of families that have completely been shattered because of diagnosis from cancer.
Yes, definitely. Now, we're talking about a test being more than 3 times the minimum wage, just one single test. And we have high levels of mortality from cancer if they're not caught early enough. And so if people can't even afford to test, how will they be able to afford treatment? And speaking of non-communicable diseases, two non-communicable diseases are on the rise right now, and that is diabetes and hypertension. And diabetes numbers right now in Nigeria is so high that I just did a documentary on it called The Silent Epidemic. People can't afford treatment. People can't afford testing. We have people whose families have asked them to take pity on them and just die instead of put them under financial burden. That's the crisis that Nigerians are living under, and it requires policy implementation on a very significant level, but it also requires the health organizations to teach Nigerians about preventative care.
Right.
Not to forget that the big pharmaceutical companies are also pulling out of Nigeria at rapid speed. And ever since this started happening, the cost of drugs is completely unbearable. Even for a small illness, a little infection, a throat infection, a tummy bug, you are paying an enormous amount of money. And a lot of people are choosing to self-treat at home and self-diagnose as well. And I think this adds majorly to the problem that we're facing.
It certainly does. Let's look at Daily Independent. Senate asked Wike to stop further demolitions in the FCT. Moves to probe allegations of land grabbing, other petitions. This order was made by the Senate. It follows a motion that was brought on the floor by Senator Ireti Kingibe, who represents the FCT. Ireti expressed concerns about illegal demolition, including estates. Ireti was seconded by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, who said the demolitions must stop pending the result of investigation by the Senate on the matter. Anyola, this matter of demolition, it always divides people, and it comes up every time we have a new FCT minister. There is a thin line between trying to restore the master plan of the city and illegal demolitions of people's property, because most of these people, they do get the authority or provisions from the FCT to go ahead and build, whether it's estate and sometimes individual plots.
You know, this is not new at all, but unfortunately, maybe because of the sort of person Nyesom Wike is, you recall that while he was governor of Port Harcourt back in 2020, he demolished 2 hotels for flouting COVID-19 protocols. And so when you have someone that has this sort of attitude, you know, who doesn't really put human face in his actions, then, you know, this is what, you know, it causes widespread anger and disillusionment. As much as, you know, we want Abuja to be organized, we want things to move, you know, we want the city to look good, I think things also need to be done, not just legally, but also with the human face. There's so many tactics they use sometimes when they want to demolish buildings. There was one that happened, although this was before Wike, where a court gave an order on a Friday. The person was served, and then they said, 48 hours. So by Sunday, they went to go and demolish it, knowing that courts will not open on weekends, of course. So they quickly demolished it, and so the person could not even appeal. These are tactics that they use. So I think, there needs to be human face in it. I know that Wike is a performer. We've seen a lot of the things that he's doing. But if he can change, his tactics, I think people will be, encouraged. And then what the National Assembly did yesterday, the Senate, I don't see them doing anything. Sorry. If you look at Wike's screening last year, ministerial screening, the questions they were asking him were so patronizing that, oh, you are a performer, you are a transformer, we know what you did in Rivers. Are you coming to come and do it? Are you coming to replicate it in Abuja? And he said, oh, yes, this is what I'm coming to do.
I know.
Look, Ireti Kingibe had to walk out yesterday before she was called back inside. They didn't want her motion to be heard.
Yeah.
And so when you already have that, you know that nothing is going to come out of any probe that they want to do.
You see, Wike seems to be trying to replicate the Nasir El-Rufai model in restoring the original Abuja master plan. But while El-Rufai went about his business in a rather slick manner and did it quite intelligently.
No,
well, yeah.
Charles.
No, excuse me.
It was the same thing. It wasn't even
Well, hold on a second. It was not that.
Thing.
It was not that crude.
It
wasn't that crude. I said El-Rufai was actually refined about it, even though, of course, the pains were the same. But in Wike's own case, come on, this is pure and applied bullying.
What was refined about El-Rufai's demolition of so many properties?
I want to differentiate between El-Rufai and Nyesom Wike right now. You had El-Rufai actually demolishing homes that went outside of the plans and the original plans of people of his own party. I believe even including a chairman of his own party at that point in time. Some of his allies lost property.
Absolutely.
However, now in Wike, what we are seeing in a report in People's Gazette, they're saying that the current minority leader in the House of Representatives, Kingsley Chinda, who's a well-known ally of Wike, is the person who has acquired the property that we saw going viral on social media. And so you have to have a perception of fairness. At the very best, even if you are going to demolish homes of people who have maybe done what is wrong or illegal, there must not also be a perception that those homes and those lands are being acquired by people who are allied with you or someone who has been your personal assistant in the past. It is absolutely not the same as El-Rufai.
Well, lands in Abuja have always been controversial, and also during El-Rufai, so many lands that he also gave to his people or to his friends, and he always said, well, if I don't give it, if I do not give it to my friends, it's in my enemies that I'll give it to. Let's move on to the Punch.
Yeah, he did.
Let's
when
move
he
on
appeared
to the
before
Punch.
the National Assembly.
Yeah, the Punch. State Police. NEC resumes talks January. Governors submit reports. What came out of this report was that majority of the 36 state governors agree on the need for state-controlled policing. This position by states is based on security challenges across board. States are dealing with ungoverned spaces, with shortage of security personnel, etc. And what is interesting about this is that 15, 20 years ago, if you had said state police, many states didn't want to hear about it. Now we have an interesting turn of events. Apparently, the time is ripe for this.
Well, I would have loved to know the number of governors that actually support this state police thing, because I recall that just two or three years ago under Buhari, you had a lot of the northern governors, opposing it. So I want to know what really changed between then and now, because they were saying they couldn't really afford it. And even now, we still have some states that are still struggling to even pay the current minimum wage. But the bigger concern, or let me say the biggest concern, is about the abuse of state police. We've seen how these governors are using the state electoral commissions to ensure that their parties are getting landslide victories in all local governments. And so by the time you add state police into the mix, only God knows what's going to come next.
Well, state police, I think the issue wasn't that they couldn't afford it. After all, they have security votes, which they don't account for the security votes. The problem, like you said, or you mentioned, always had been fears or concerns that the state governors will abuse the control of state police. If at this level you have that kind of issue going on at the state level, when we have an inspector general of police at the national level. What will happen if they are the ones that run the show completely, Charles?
Absolutely, and that has always been my fear ever since they started this debate or discussion about state police. You know, we have this culture of impunity and abuse by chief executives of states, and of course, you know, I have this feeling that, you know, once state police is established, it will just be an instrument of terror in the hands of the governors. So if we're going to have state police, I think there should be clearly defined rules of engagement properly entrenched in the Nigerian constitution so that they don't become another instrument of abuse in the hands of governors. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, so I think more of that will be discussed. They said in January, so there will be more engagement to see what the modalities will be. Let's look at other papers. Daily Sun, INEC mulls PVC phase out, tampering with LG funds, an impeachable offense, AGF warns governors. NUC delegation visits OUK University for on-the-spot assessment. We've seen Daily Independent. Let's go to Vanguard. A mountain too high for Super Eagles, talking about 2026 World Cup qualification. Insecurity governors endorse creation of state police. We've seen that. Okwama leaders, more stakeholders condemn death in army detention. And tax reform bills divide governors. Onto Daily Trust. INEC seeks legal backing for IREV. National Assembly to pass 2025 budget. January, as Tinubu submits proposal Tuesday. We also have Kano Governor reshuffles, cabinet drops SSG, COS, 5 commissioners. Then on to New Telegraph, Allied plane incident in Abuja paralyzes flight operations. Is this today's paper, Friday? I don't think so. But let's look at the international headlines. Here we have a Daily Graphic. Transition team probes last-minute deals, payments, and recruitments involved in the country. And then we have Citizen. Is Joburg losing its shine? Weak link in the chain. Livability of a city is crucial, says experts. There are issues such as relentless municipal tariff hikes, 8 mayors in 5 years, political infighting, and point scoring, working in the interest of individuals rather than the city. So this has left the city a shadow of its former self, experts say. Johannesburg is the financial capital of South Africa and hosts more than 70% of South African companies. Therefore, Yolanda, one can understand why people are worrying about the livability of the city.
Well, besides the political aspects that are affecting the country, I think a good thing to look at as well are the social issues involved. I think the crime rates have increased by so much in the recent years to a point that tourists are afraid and highly concerned when going over there. The city just I think 2-3 days ago, Constance, we were speaking about the issues in Gauteng, you know, with the water shortages,
yes,
with the, you know, the shortages in electricity, and it's just, I think, coming to a halt. And I think that South Africa is indeed somehow losing its shine, as well as the xenophobic attacks. We cannot forget about those. It's not just this hate on, you know, your fellow man, but there's also violence and the armed violence as well, the armed robberies. It's a bit much. It's a bit much, if I must
Yolanda,
say.
you know, South Africans will come after you, no?
Don't worry, they're my brothers and sisters. They understand it too.
All right, Daily Telegraph. Andrew's links to China spy revealed. The Duke of York was said to have appointed an alleged Chinese spy as his business advisor and promised him links to the royal family. This has been seen as a breach of national security. The Chinese was invited to the Duke's birthday party and authorized to seek investors in China on his behalf. I mean, Andrew seems to be causing more trouble for the royal family. The other time he was involved in a sex scandal issue. He was also involved with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And the stakes are high in this particular issue because MI5 says the this particular Chinese is a member of the Communist Party, Yolanda. So you can imagine how they're frightened over this.
Yes, well, I hear Charles laughing here, but before I understand why you're laughing, let me just say that Andrew is a war veteran, a decorated one at that. So these allegations of espionage leave a lot to be desired. Charles, can
Actually,
you?
that's what Andrew was one royal I really admired, particularly, you know, when I learned he was a fighter pilot during the Falkland Wars. Of course, he did participate actively.
Well noted.
The Argentines threatened that they'll send his body back in a coffin, but he went back alive.
I just need to say that there's nothing admirable about Andrew.
Well,
Okay.
that was admirable. Then,
There's
of course, you
nothing
know,
admirable
his
about him.
lifestyle was probably more scandalous than his brothers because of the kind of girlfriends he kept. I mean, all shapes, sizes, sorts, and then, you know, he seems to be growing worse as he grows older.
The accusation was that it was with underage girls.
Yeah,
And I think that's very
the
specifically
pedophilia
different.
thing with
It's
Jeffrey
very
Epstein.
specifically different
And
from
there was a
saying
rape
that he
case
lived-
against him as well.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
very specific.
Okay, let's leave Andrew alone. We have more serious issues. Let's look at I newspaper. NATO wants Europe, it must move to wartime mindset as UK faces new Trump clash over defense spending. Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Mark Rutte, says the organization is not spending enough to prepare for the threat of a future conflict with Russia. He said Europe is not ready for what will come in the next 5 years, especially as Russia is preparing for a long-term confrontation with Ukraine. And Yola, Europeans have reasons to be worried against the background of a change of government in America. Trump has always suggested he will not protect NATO allies, that they need to spend more.
You know, if you look at the reason NATO was created in the first place, you know, was to ensure that you don't have figures like Hitler coming up again and, you know, annexing countries all over the place and trying to dominate the world. And the U.S. has played a pivotal role in ensuring that, you know, there hasn't been any World War III so far. But with Trump now, he says he wants to ensure that there's peace, global peace. But at the end of the day, you're leaving your allies out in the cold. Yes, you know, to some extent, his argument to make sense that, look, the U.S. cannot be picking up your bill all the time. You need to pay your fair share. But you look at it that since COVID happened, the economies of so many of these countries have been badly affected. You look at France, for instance, where their debt-to-GDP ratio is over 100%. You look at the UK, where Starmer is even having issues. He's trying to introduce new taxes, and there's a lot of pushback. Okay. So now I don't know how they're going to achieve all this, because if you're going to increase your defense spending, obviously it's going to affect your budget too. It's going to affect, you are going to have to reduce, you know, social programs. Foreign aid to Africa has to reduce as well too. So there's a lot going on.
Have to go. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Enola, for joining us today. This is all we have for the paper review.
Well, I hope my allies treat me better than Trump plans to treat his. That's all the time we have for you here on Daybreak. It's goodbye from me. I'm Adesua Giwa-Osage.
Please do keep it here on Arise News. I'm Charles Eruka.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. The morning show is next. Goodbye.